The human spine, your spine, is evolution's masterpiece, perfected over 4 billion years if you count all the prototypes, and in daily use for 3 million years. It's a marvel of design. 24 vertebrae, precisely stacked, each just hefty enough to bear the brunt of all those above it, and each connected to its neighboring vertebra by 6 joints, joints that in combination allow the spine to flex and extend, to bend side to side, and to rotate on its axis. Movements that in combination allowed us to successfully run down rabbits and run from jackals, the whole while balancing an 11-pound head on top of the 7 cervical vertebrae. The spine allowed us to stand, to walk, and to run. It freed our hands to use tools, to hunt, and to create culture. Our spines made us human. I've had extra innings with the spine because as a medical student, I took it apart in the anatomy lab, and as a surgeon, I put it back together in the OR for a long career. And the more time I've spent with the spine, the more amazing it seems. It's just perfect. So it comes as an immense shock to learn that our spine fails most of us, and it fails starkly. 80% of Americans develop back pain that makes them seek medical care at some point in their lives. Often it becomes a chronic problem, sometimes treated with opioids, opening the door to the catastrophe of human drug addiction. Additionally, back pain costs America over $100 billion a year. That's right up there with cancer and heart disease. And here's the thing. Not only does the spine fail most of us, but it fails mysteriously. Almost always, x-rays, CT scans, all that stuff is normal. Heck, we don't even know what's hurting. Is it the discs, the facet joints, the fascia, the muscle? We don't know. It's pretty clearly not tissue damage or inflammation, but what then? We don't know. But here's a clue. Back pain is virtually unknown in cultures that still sit in traditional ways. Japan has a back pain rate of about 3%. Contrast that with the United States, 80%. Our spines are identical. So what's going on? Well, our office chairs are predicated on the idea that we require support in order to sit. So we get the headrest and the backrest and the armrest and the footrest. And then, in order to restore something that looks more like normal posture, we get the coup de grace, lumbar support. But we aren't being supported. We're being confined and restrained. Winston Churchill once observed that we shape our environment once, and then it shapes us forever. We spend on average 11 hours a day in intimate contact with chairs, and they are reshaping us for the worse. Much worse. But what if we started over with a clean sheet of paper, got rid of the headrest, all that stuff? What if we got rid of the fixed seat? What would that look like? Is that even possible? Well, after a year of failed prototypes, I discovered this geometric solid. It's the volume of intersection of 2 cylinders at right angles. Placed on top of a surface with another surface placed on top of it, it can rock on the surface it sits on, and the surface on top of it can also rock, allowing rocking in every direction. If we take that shape and put it under the seat pan of a chair, we get a chair that moves in all directions. If you sit on it, it allows, actually it requires, moment-to-moment adjustment of your posture. But it all happens at the spinal reflex level. Your conscious brain is free to listen in to the conversation that your spine is having with gravity. But it all happens without any user input. It just kind of feels like floating. So it feels interesting, but is it accomplishing anything? Well, we don't yet have any double-blind crossover study kind of data, but here's a story. We sometimes go down to Church Street, the walking street in Burlington, and just put out a few chairs just to see. And these things attract people like flypaper, and it usually goes like this. You know, people are a little hesitant, and then they give it a little wiggle, and then they sit down on it, And they immediately lose their balance. And then they very quickly find their center. And over the next 90 to 120 seconds, their sternum comes up and their head comes back. The skull balances on C1 and C2, the atlas and axis, the first two cervical vertebrae. Their lumbar lordosis, the low back curve, reasserts itself. Their shoulders relax. And pretty quickly, they're sitting with the casual posture of a baby sitting on the beach. So anyway, we're sitting on Church Street, and a young woman, maybe 13 or 14 years old, comes and sits down on one of our chairs, and she's just sitting there kind of blissing out in the sun. No phone, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then she gets up and walks away. But before she gets 10 paces, she says, "You know, I think it makes me walk better," as though some postural reset button had been pushed. Well, encouraged by this, I took a couple of chairs to a big academic ergonomic conference where researchers from all over the world were presenting their work. And there I met a guy who's very big in the world of office chair design. And we had a spirited conversation in which he talked about chair design, and I talked about anatomy and physiology and anthropology and epidemiology and a bunch of other ologies. And we swapped email addresses, and I didn't think much more about it until I got home and I found a heartfelt email from this guy in my inbox in which he said, "I feel terrible. I've spent my life trying to make chairs so comfortable that no one would ever want to get up. And now I find that sitting slumped in front of a computer all day is catastrophic for people's posture and for their overall health. But what am I supposed to do? We've convinced people that they can't sit without lumbar support, and now we can't sell a chair unless it has lumbar support." The poor guy, and really his whole industry, is trapped by their legacy. So our little startup is not trying to make a better chair. We're trying to upend the idea of what a chair is. This won't be an easy lift because everybody already knows what a chair is. They're wrong. But this won't be an easy argument to win. So what to do? Well, maybe we just need a different audience, an audience that comes with no preconceptions about what chairs are, what sitting is, like say, kids. So we took some of our chairs to schools in Burlington, Vermont, and the kids really got into it. Kids love to move, and they instinctively know that sitting still all day is a terrible idea. And our chairs gave them sanctioned privilege to squirm, without being criticized by anybody in the room. It was sort of sanctioned squirming, and they really got into it. I thought this was an original idea, but it turns out that another researcher, a friend of mine, Skrede Fudling in Norway, had already had the idea of active sitting as a sort of postural prophylaxis for kids in school. And he'd come up with what he calls the rodeo chair, which is really very Scandinavian and beautiful to look at. And I have to say, it's very amusing to sit on, or you might almost say ride on. It's just very interesting. But when I asked Frode how much he charged for these things, he said $800. And I said, "Whew, and schools will pay that?" And Frode said, "Sure, Norway." Well, in the United States, of course, we can't afford glitter for preschoolers' art projects, so $800 chairs are pretty much off the table, at least for most schools. So, what to do? Well, how about this? Let's make chairs that are free. No, really. We've designed a chair that's made out of plywood. The pieces just snap together using a self-locking joint that we invented. No screws, no glues. The rocking mechanism is an old tennis ball. These things are cheaper than free because people will pay you to take them away. The height's adjustable because it's plywood, for crying out loud. If you have a shorter kid, saw off some of the legs and you have a shorter chair. And then we stitch the top on with a piece of bungee cord, like you'd sew on a button. In fact, it kind of looks like a button. So we call it a button chair. So an active chair for $5 worth of plywood. Finally, high school shop projects can produce something useful. And here's the really cool part. These chair parts are cut by a CNC router. It's a sort of a robotic, demonic chisel on speed. Here it is cutting seat tops, and then it cuts the legs. There's hardly any waste, throw that away. Fit the pieces together, lock it together with a mallet, wham, wham, wham. Add a tennis ball and a seat top, there's your chair. So an active chair, pretty quickly made. And here's the really cool part. The CNC router is just following the instructions of a digital file. So we can email that file anywhere in the world. We can literally stuff these chairs through the internet, and if somebody on the other end has a CNC router, they can print as many chairs as they want. They can print a room full of chairs, for active chairs, for kids who want active chairs to sit on. So could we give our kids a future without back pain? I think we could. And here's the thing. If we could do that for our kids, and they did it for their kids, in 2 generations, no one would have back pain. And really, at $5 a kid, can we not do this? Thank you.